Okay, in this video, we're going to talk about how to meet standard relative to the requirements on the summarize your story and make important inferences about a character assignment. So the first thing you have to do to meet standard is that the summary you write needs to be clear to anyone, even if they haven't read the book you're writing about. And what that really comes down to usually is adding little extra details that would explain confusing things to a reader, usually about names, places, and events in the book that unless you'd read the book, you wouldn't really understand. So you need to give more details. Here's an example right here of how a person did that. This is their summary. They said, in the book, The Bogart by Susan Cooper, which is always a good way to start. Mentioning the book, mentioning anything important about the book, and then mention the author's name. A young girl named Emily and her little brother Jessup take a trip to a castle in Scotland. And the thing that makes us meet standard are the things that are in green right here. If the person had just said, Emily and Jessup take a trip, I wouldn't have any idea what they're talking about. Who are Emily? Who are Jessup? Why do I care about them? A young girl named Emily. Okay, cool. I'm going to make an inference that she's the main character. And her little brother Jessup take a trip to a castle in Scotland. Okay, cool. Along their journey, they meet a group of teenagers who are growing up on their own. They are known as the Gang of Five. And the thing that they did really well here was instead of saying, along their journey, they meet the Gang of Five. I'd be like, who's the Gang of Five? What? There's a gang? 5 people? 5 horses? I have no idea. The green part right here is where they give context. Giving context is one of the most important things you can do in your writing to make your writing sound more mature and be more clear to anyone who reads it. So they say along their journey, they meet a group of teenagers who are growing up on their own. They are known as the Gang of Five. All 7 of them stay in the castle for a few nights, but there are only 7 people there? Question mark. Mysteriously, practical jokes were being played on them. They were all confused as to who was playing the jokes on them. Then they slowly started to blame each other. Little did they know, a ghost that was known as the Bogart had joined them on their journey and played many tricks on them. The key that they did really well here is when they introduced this ghost, the Bogart, they explained it was a ghost. If they had just said, then they slowly started to blame each other, it was the Bogart. I'd be like, what? The Bogart? What's that? They added those extra details to make sure I understood. Also, as a whole, they did a really good job going in order, one thing at a time, and just highlighting important things that happened in the text. They didn't tell me every little detail. They just told me the details I needed to know to understand the big idea of what happened so far in the story. Remember that when you summarize the story, you're only summarizing the section that you read to do this assignment, which in this case is just the first 1/6 of the book. Beyond that, the text evidence they use is in the form of a direct quotation from the text. Let's take an example just through one of these columns here. It needs to be the same for each one. But the first thing they did, Dad, call them up. This comes straight from the story. That works. That's an example of something the character said. The inference you make are clearly related to the text evidence. That means when I read this, and then I read the inference you made, it's really clear why the two relate to each other. And it says, she must be fairly bossy or sassy to demand her father to do something. Okay, cool, that makes sense. And then it says the inference that you make are clearly important details to notice about the character. So beyond just having the evidence and beyond making an inference, you need to explain why is that inference so important in the text. And so what they wrote is, we can infer that she'll be demanding in the story, which would probably have a big impact in the text. This works and it totally meets standard.